Hello everyone. So our character is animated, running and turning and jumping and doing all his stuff. Now we need to do some camera tweaking. So the right mouse button will let us rotate in the direction we're facing, but if we click the left mouse button, it might be nice to be able to rotate just the camera around. And then we'll zoom it in and out and stuff like that. So let's jump to that. So inside the player blueprint, let's do the zooming in and out first. So let's go into the viewport and grab our camera boom, which is the point that our follow camera is actually attached to the person. And I'm going to move it up to about middle of his back. You can move it where you like to. This is the point that the camera will rotate around. So if we go into the event graph, we need two input events. So we'll get mouse wheel up and right click mouse wheel down. Now this is when we scroll our mouse wheel up or if we scroll it down, so that way, like you're zooming in on all this. So when we zoom, we're basically going to take our camera boom and tell it to shorten or lengthen its target arm length. So we'll grab our camera boom, we will get the target arm length, which is that red line if you're looking at it right here. This is the target arm and the length is how far away it is from the camera. So its default is 400. Now if we scroll the wheel up, that means we want kind of moving it towards the character, we'll zoom it in. So let's move our camera boom up. We will set target arm length. We'll hook that right there. Now we don't want it to just go to be subtracted and then immediately in. We are going to subtract, so from the target arm length we'll do a subtract, and we'll subtract about 20 from it, but then we want to clamp it so that we can't get too close or too far away. So from this one we'll type clamp float. This will be the value that we're inputting here. And the minimum is the closest it can get, and the max is the farthest it can get. So I don't want it to get closer than, let's say, 125 units, and I don't want it to get further away than 700, we'll say. So this will make sure that no matter what we put in right here, it'll only stay within those. So if we grab all this, Control C and Control V, we can copy it to the mouse wheel down. Oops. And then we can plug our target arm length right here, our camera boom right here, and instead of replacing this with a plus 20, I'm just going to replace the 20 with negative 20, because subtracting a negative makes it into a positive value. So if we're subtracting negative 20, we're effectively adding 20 to whatever the length is. So now out here, I can zoom in, and I can zoom out to a certain point, but no closer and no further. So that's what we want. Now the other thing we want to do with the camera is, if we click in the left mouse button, it'd be nice to be able to rotate the camera around the player without affecting the direction he's moving. So we'll do this right up here, right above the right mouse button. We'll just get a left mouse button event. And same thing here, if it's pressed, we want a LMB held, so that we can say the left mouse button is being held down, is true on pressed, and is false on released. Now the way we're going to do this is we're going to take our character movement and we're going to use controller desired rotation. We're going to set that false, because remember the controller is the mouse rotation and it affects which way our character will turn. So, whoa, okay, he's there. So now we can rotate it around, but it's not going to function just right, because if we press up and down, it'll, wherever we rotate the camera, that becomes the new forward and back, which can throw us off if we're running through the forest or something and we want to kind of look around our character and examine him, etc. So what we would do is, when we turn off the controller desired rotation, right before we turn that off, let's get the control rotation, and we will promote this to a variable called run direction, I guess, or forward direction, whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to leave it as run direction. Then let's go over to our input events right here. So right now we're moving right and left based on whether or not the right mouse button is held down, but we want to do this whether or not the right mouse button or the left mouse button is held down. So we'll plug in an OR boolean and plug in this LMB. And then down here, same thing. So right mouse button or left mouse button. It's like that. So it's still doing like this, because what else? But we're able to move to the right and left when the left mouse button is held down. So that's what we wanted there. But what we want for up here is where we're getting our control rotation. That's taking in the direction of the mouse. But if we're moving our mouse, we don't want that to necessarily happen. So we want to, from this get forward vector for our add movement input, we want to take off here and do a select float. This will take in a boolean and then let us pick between two float values. So if we got the left mouse button held down, then we're going to want to use the run direction control rotation. So we'll get that. We can right click and split the struct pin, and we'll plug the Z value into the A, because this is where we're coming out. We want the Z. We'll plug in that left mouse button right there. And then for the B, it'll be the original get control rotation. So now just to show you the backwards and forward, so no matter which direction I'm... Oh, I messed it up for a second. Hang on. Alright, so he's set up. And if I rotate, look, he's still running forward, running back. I messed it up because I pushed the left and right, which isn't fixed up just yet. So it messes with it a little bit. But we can fix that same way. So same thing here. Let's move this jump out of the way. We don't need that. We don't need it that close, at least. So we're going to do the same thing right here. We're going to select a float based on the left mouse button, but we need to do it for the X and the Z on this one. So select float here, select float here, and we're going to plug the X into the B and the Z into the B in the respective ones. So just be a little in-between thing right here. So we can take this run direction rotation that we've established, plug the X into the A and the Z into the A, and then take this left mouse button into the boolean for both. So now I can rotate my camera, and I'm still running in the direction I originally was, so that if I decide to start looking around, it won't throw off the player's movement and get confusing. But there is a small problem to where now, if I let go of the mouse button, he just kind of stays doing his own thing. So we need to tell the camera to rotate back to its original point. So up in our left mouse button on the released side of things right here, we're going to add a timeline. This will be reset cam. And from the released, after we turn left mouse button off, we will hook this to play from start. Let's move this way over here, because we're going to take this, just in case they push the button again, it'll stop the rotation, the timeline. So I'm going to double click and open this up and set the length to about ½ a second. You can set this to be however long you want it to take for the camera to go from the point it's at to the point it was. I'm going to add a float track called alpha, and then on the timeline I'm going to right click and add our keys. So at time 0 value 0, and then at right click time 0.5 value 1. Now if we scroll out and box select both of these, we can zoom to fit horizontally with this button. Right clicking will let us get our interpolation menu, and we can auto that so that it kind of smoothly in and out of it. So what we want to update while this timeline is playing is our rotation. So we're going to get our player controller, because the player controller is what monitors all the control inputs like that. And we're going to set control rotation. Now we're going to need to lerp between two values. So off the new rotation, we're going to get a lerp rotator. The alpha will go right here, and you might think we're wanting to go from our run direction back to our original thing, and that's what I thought at first, but it caused a lot of snapping issues. We want to go from our control rotation, the current one, so get control rotation, because once we've moved the mouse, the control rotation actually updates. This is where we stopped it, registered it at, to be bound to our character. So the current get control rotation that we're actively using is the A, and then returning to where we established is our B. Well, actually, you know what? Let's take this left mouse button held, and just so it doesn't mess with our inputs until the timeline is done, we'll just hook it to the finished on this side of things, so that as long as the camera is rotating around our character, they're still moving as the way they should, instead of suddenly jerking in a wrong direction. Oop. Alright, if that happens, right here is a shortest path. That should take that out. So now I can run forward, and then yeah, so it's looking pretty good. Oh, and then the last thing we need to do is right after we set this, we'll get our character movement one more time, because now we need to tell it set use controller desired rotation, because up here we're turning that off, so we need to turn it back on. So now let's try it. So I can run forward, I can look around my character, I can zoom in and out as I want to, and then I can, yeah, and it resets back to right. We don't want to plug our get control rotation directly in, because it'll update based on everything going right there. So we will take our get control rotation, let's just promote this to a variable called return from, I don't know what to call it, that'll work. Something that lets you know this is the variable for returning my camera to its original point. And then we'll just plug that into the A, because since if we're doing it directly from this, it'll update perpetually, so as it moves it'll get the new rotation and then try to use that. So if we have a set starting point, it'll function smoother. Yeah, it's smoother. Much more better. Much more better. So yeah, we got our camera movement set up. Zoom in a little bit, zoom out a little bit. Alright, let's do the mouse portion now. So we're going to save everything real quick. So in our player blueprint now we're going to set it up to where we can start right clicking on stuff in order to interact with it. So we'll just set up a base function for it. So let's add a right mouse button event. I know what you're thinking. We have one right here. We could just use it. I'm going to leave those separate. You can build onto it if you want to. I prefer not to. I don't know why. It just seems to work better for me. They won't interact with each other. They should be fine. But I just like doing it this way. So when we click the right mouse button, we need to get our player controller so that we can have access to our mouse, because what we're going to do is we're going to fire a trace channel off from the mouse cursor's position and see what's underneath it. So from get player controller, we need to get objects under, or get hit result under cursor for objects. So this basically, yeah, see, it performs a collision query under the mouse cursor looking for object types. So for right now, off the object types, we will make an array and just leave it as world static, and we'll show you how this works. So from the hit result, let's break that. We'll add a branch right here at the right mouse button, and if there's a blocking hit, then we will just print a string, and we'll just print the display name of whatever hit actor we just got. So if I jump in, ramp 2, quarter cylinder, ramp, cube, now it's checking underneath wherever I'm clicking to show you. There's cube 4, cube, cube, those have the same name. Cube 11. Oh, I clicked behind it. But yeah, that's how you do that. So if we go into our project settings, we'll set up our own custom object types. So if you type in object, you can get the object channels. I want, let's see, interact. Another one that is enemy. And another one that will be player. And that should work. That should be fine for now. So now over in our player base blueprint, we can adjust our make array. We'll add all three of these, and let's get interact, enemy, and player. So the way we can actually use this to determine what we should do when we right click on something is, let's get rid of that print string. If we go to the hit component, we can get collision object type. It'll get us an enumeration of basically all the object channels that we have available. So if we do a switch on collision channel, then we can tell it, hey, we just clicked on something to interact with, fire off an interact event, or we clicked on an enemy, let's do our auto attack thingamabob, or we clicked on a player, let's highlight them so we can cast a spell on them, etc. You get the point. I'm rambling, so we'll compile that. So we don't actually have anything right now that has those object types. We will be setting that up pretty we got time. Let's do that too, why not? So in our blueprints folder, let's right click and we'll add a new folder. This will be our interaction folder. Interaf. I don't know how to spell. Double click, open that up, going to right click blueprint class of an actor. I'm going a little bit fast, I know, but let's see. Alright, so this will be our base interactable underscore BP. Double click and open this up. And we're going to add a cube. Just for now. So for that cube, let's go to its collision. With it selected over in the details panel, you can find collision presets. We'll go to here, custom object type, and then you can pick whatever you like. This is going to be interact, so I'll click interact. So now on this side of things, we need to tell our mouse cursor to do something on hovering. So it will be, let's get mouse on cursor begin overlap. So mouse input event actor begin cursor over. So when it has the mouse moved over it with clickable interface, we can tell it to do something. And then event cursor end over. So it's like a begin and end overlap, but specifically for the mouse. We'll get the player controller, and we will set mouse cursor. So we can set the current mouse cursor. So I'm going to copy this and paste it to the end overlap. What this does, it will let us define which cursor widget we'll use based on what we're doing. So if the end cursor overlap, we're going to use the default. The only problem with this thing is that I don't know how to customize the labels for these, and I don't know how to add to them, so we have to use basically what we've got on hand. But we're not going to use hand right here. We're going to basically just use the list. But I will show you where you can define these. So if we go in here and we type in cursor in our project settings, under software cursors, we can tell it, like, we can select what cursor we're defining and then a widget for it to use. So if we come back out here, go back into our blueprints folder and add a new folder called UI_elements. Double click, open that up, add a new folder called cursors, and we'll double click and open that up, and we can add a user interface of a widget. This is how we will define what our cursor looks like. So we'll add the widget, call this cursor_base, double click and open it up, and we want it to be about 50 units by 50 units. So up in the top right, instead of fill screen, we'll put custom on screen. Width 50, height 50. Then we can add a canvas panel right here. I'm going to right click and wrap that with a scale box and wrap that with a size box. So the size box, we're going to do a width and height override of 50 and 50. This will just basically, no matter the resolution of the player's computer screen, it'll match the way it's supposed to. So now we will add an image right here. I'm going to anchor it to the full screen. And I'm gonna just, for right now, let's see, what was that thing called? Where's that face? No, I'll just use this. It'll just make it a just to show you. I'm gonna use a pink. I'm gonna duplicate that and create a cursor_default. I guess we could have just. I guess we don't need to name that base. We can just, we got cursor default. This will be cursor interact or something. So cursor_interact. And for interacting, I'll change it to a green. So like red, nothing, green, yes. So for our default, we'll set it to the cursor default. And for, let's use text edit beam, I suppose, we'll use that for the interact. So in our base interactable, instead of just punching that in right here, there might be different types of interactables. So for instance, you got a door, you want to use a certain cursor on the door, you can define another thing to use. Or if you got something like a chest and you want it to have like a loot bag icon. So what we're going to do is we're just going to promote this to a variable. And this will be interact cursor type. Now just for our purposes, I am going to default it to text edit beam, but this will let us make children objects of our base interactable that we can alter this so that all the, so like if we have a base harvestable node, then we can have like a pickaxe icon or an axe icon, or you get what I'm saying. So if I throw my cube right here, so now my mouse is red by default, but if I go over my mouse, if I go over, it does nothing. So in the player blueprint, right here on begin play, set mouse over events. Yeah, set enable mouse over events. So we gotta tell the mouse, hey, start looking for stuff. There it goes. So now when I hover over that, it turns green, and if I'm off of it, it turns red. Fancy that, right? Isn't that cool? Isn't that interesting? Sorry if I sound a little funny. I'm kind of tired, but it's cool. It works. So that's good news. So what's the last thing we can do? Because we got a few minutes. Let's do it real quick. Let's go to open game art, because I want to show y'all something. So if you come here, free site, love this place, got a lot of cool stuff. Type in cursor, and right here is an RPG cursor icon set. It looks great. Look at all this. This is what I used when I set up the preview. They're great. They got everything we need. So if you want to grab that, I will leave this link in the description of this video. I already have it downloaded, so I'm not going to. That's for a while. There it is. So if we, let's see, UI elements, cursors, import, go to where you got it saved, cursor. Oh, it's saved under RPG. RPG cursor set. Alright, so right here is the RPG cursor set that you will get. I don't remember what this, oh, I know what that is. We'll go over that later. This is the RPG cursor set. It's one file. It's got all the things on it, so I'll show you how we'll get it. We'll import it, and then we can right click it. Right here under sprite actions, we can extract sprites. And there you go. It'll just block off all of these, extract it just like that, and now you got all of these handy dandy icons. So I'm going to be using this as my default. So I'm going to go into, I don't have the default one open. Of course I don't. So here's my default, and here's my default. So instead of using just a blank image, I'm going to just drop that in right there and set my tint back to normal. Now if we leave it like this, the way this is set up is actually the image is centered over the mouse. So if we take our cursor image and just line the point up right in the middle, it'll make it a lot easier to use. So let me show you. See how it kind of jerked around a little bit, but if I just barely get on the corner of it, then you can tell the mouse is on it, and it just lines up a little bit better. So this is going to be my, like I'm hovering over an interactable object, and I'm going to go into my interact, and I'll set that there, back to white, compile. So if I leave that one on there, like off-centered, see how I can kind of get off of it a little bit, and it'll throw off the player a little bit. So you want to make sure that whatever your point of your cursor is, that it's pretty much in the center. So you just offset it by whatever. If you need to count lines, sometimes that's what I do. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Close enough. Right in there somewhere is fine. Same thing here. We're good. And then there you go. Mouse cursor changes to let you know, like, hey, this is something of interest. What are you? Now if I go back into my right mouse button event, and let's say that one had the interact type, so let's just print string to say interacting with. So I can right click anywhere I want, doesn't do anything till I right click on the actual thing. Now obviously we don't want to be able to interact with things from way over here, but we'll get into that in the next one. So that is gonna set it up for this one. I will see y'all soon for some follow-up stuff and some cool stuff. So bye.